Hello, everybody, and welcome to part number 6 of my World War One videos. Um, so as we left off, trench warfare. Trenches originally started out as holes that individual soldiers dug. Then they slowly began, well, sometimes rapidly, began to actually interconnect, causing pretty much um, sometimes a maze of zigzagging lines. The Germans actually had some better trenches, ironically, because they knew that they were going to be held up in the trenches for a while. Um, so they actually dug bunkers that they then reinforced with concrete to act as pretty much bomb shelters from when there were rapid, like large amounts of artillery fire. And this ground was incredibly low and incredibly moist. That's why they get the term trench foot from, because their feet used to get so moist and molded and infected from being in the trenches for so long. As you can see, this line pretty much represents miles and miles and miles of trenches. That's the Western Front. There were a lot of failures of the Schlieffen Plan. It didn't take into consideration that if we invade Belgium, the British are going to get mad. Or that the Belgium would even put up any resistance whatsoever, let alone hold them back for 3 days. Or the rapid mobilization of the Russian army. And they didn't think that they would have problems supplying their soldiers. And yeah, von Moltke should never have changed the plan. And don't think that's the end of the video quite yet, because his PowerPoints don't cover all the things. That only got us up to 1914, and there's still another 5 years to go. Sorry for the paper. He didn't make a PowerPoint for that. So there was during I'll actually see if I can find another part or PowerPoint to use, and I will be back in just a moment. Oops. So I'm back, and I couldn't find any other documents on any other of the teacher's pages, so I guess I'll just have to go off my notes and off my head. So we left off at trench warfare. Trench warfare was kind of a broad kind of topic. The whole idea of trench warfare is, I can't really draw it, but you have two separate lines, and they tend to be zigzagging. You have the enemy trench and your trench. Between that is no man's land. And within no man's land, you have barbed wire, mines, traps, ditches from artillery shots, and it can be anywhere from a couple 100 feet to a mile in no man's land. And between the barbed wire and your trench and the enemy trench are machine guns. So anyone dumb enough to pop out and try to run across no man's land is going to get shot. There are also snipers waiting for anybody just to poke their little head up and shoot them right in the head. The term for for running up to no man's land is called going over the top, because you're literally going over the top. And during this time, it was the first time that they ever used airplanes for a military aspect, because airplanes at that time was a relatively new technology. At first, they didn't use it for actual combat. They used it just to scout out, like, that there's like an enemy movement over here. Fire artillery barrage this way, or to get better coordinates. And that eventually having two planes in the sky eventually led to putting weapons on the planes and having them fight it out for air supremacy. And the most famous of all airplane of pretty much any World War I pilots is, you guessed it, the Red Baron. His real name was Manfred von Richthofen. Sorry if I butchered that. He actually flew pretty much all of his missions with his Great Dane. And he had confirmed I'm pretty sure he had something like 40 confirmed kills and air supremacy victories. During this time, artillery barrages were quite normal. But they also developed this new type of artillery barrage called creeping military artillery barrage. This is where you slowly move the artillery barrage forward, forward, forward by feet at a time. Because at first, when you attacked, you had an artillery barrage just destroy everything. And they believed that did destroy all Germans and that nothing could survive that. So, when they walked up there, the Germans had been in their bunkers. They pop up, grab their machine guns, and start mowing people down. So they developed a creeping artillery barrage, which, like I said, moves feet at a time. And this was synchronized to the minute, pretty much to the minute, how much it would move each minute. And behind that, there would be troops moving at the exact pace as the wall, because if you move too fast, you're going to get shot. Move too slow, you're not going to make it to the trench before they pop out and start shooting you down. But if you time it just right, you can get into their trenches before they have time to get to their machine guns, and they're sitting ducks. They actually designed the trenches to be in zigzags. That way, you have to turn the corner that way you can't just shoot down the entire trench. You have to turn the corner to shoot. And that worked very effectively. For a time. But also, men, with all these constant artillery barrages and little sleep, started a little thing called shell shock. Or combat fatigue, or post-traumatic stress disorder. But for our purposes, let's call it shell shock. This was when men were on the front line too long, and they just went absolutely mad. I mean, they got like 1,000-yard stare, like they were looking somewhere 1,000 yards away. They had trouble sleeping, and this continued even after the war. So they then decided to rotate the troops. Okay, so you guys are in the back, you guys are in the middle, you guys are in the upper middle, and then you guys in the front. Then they rotate them every week or so, or a few days, depending on where you were. And so that brings us to 1915, the Gallipoli Campaign. This was for control of the Dardanelles, and that's I pronounce it Dardanelles, but spelled with a D. This was an area between. Let me just pull up a map here. Okay, there we go. I'm sorry if it's a bit blurry, but the Dardanelles are like right about here. No wait, actually they're down here, sorry. Whoops! Gardenells are right down here. The red area here is the Ottoman Empire. Right here is Constantinople or Istanbul. Gardenells pretty much this little area that if they were like this little strait. And it had hundreds or dozens and dozens of forts defending it. But if they captured Istanbul or Constantinople, whichever you want to call it, right here, that would allow the Russians better access, and they could just take out the Ottoman Empire completely from the war. It would also allow the Russians to move through pretty much up through some of the old Austro-Hungary, old Ottoman Empire and Greece. Which does actually sound like a great plan. But not everything is as good as it sounds. And I'm sorry again for the paper is moving. So Winston Churchill actually planned this very idea. So he said, let's get the Anzac, or Australia and New Zealand Army Corps troops, and a couple old British ships that are like on their way out, not even useful anymore after the war, and just sail them up through here. The problem is they underestimated how well defended they would be. First they had a couple ships go in there and sweep out the mines. Then they went through. They were then thinking about retreating, but when they were thinking about that, retreating, the Ottoman Empire, or the Turks, or whatever was fighting over there, put mines right behind them, so that when they retreated, they just blew themselves up. Sad day. So it was an epic failure, and was not planned well enough. So that brings us to the second battle of Ypres, which is, I believe, somewhere up through here. This was the first battle in which they used poisonous gases. The Germans used poisonous gases, which was by the rules of war against the rules. But Germans, all's fair in love and war, they used 3 different types of gases, all poisonous. Chlorine, which was, I would consider, the least effective, because one, it caused a lot of coughing, and I find this ironic because we had a chlorine leak in my area not too long ago, and luckily I was at school at the time. But yeah, they pretty much shut everybody in so they could clean it up. The second, which is a lot more efficient, I'd say, and not to be cruel, phosgene, because it caused a lot less coughing, making it less obvious, so they breathe in more and die. And finally, the most brutally efficient one there is, mustard gas. This was, I also forgot to say about chlorine, that they figured out that if you peed in a rag and held it up to your mouth, your face, even though it smelled horrible, the ammonia would counteract the chlorine, and you'd be able to breathe. They also used mustard gas, which was so horrible. I mean, it was this yellowish fog that was fairly dense, and if the ground was moist, which it was, it would get soaked up in the ground, even after months or weeks after the initial gassing. If the ground dried up, they kicked up some of those dust particles, it would still be a deadly gas.